Okay, we're live. All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brother Garfield from the Dagger Squad YouTube channel. I would like to introduce the audience to someone who I respect, who I'd like to meet for the longest, but for some reason, the opportunity has finally fell in my, for lack of a better term, lap. That we have the great Dr. Gina Paige from African Ancestry. How are you doing today, sis?
I'm Black and proud and grateful. Thank you for asking.
All right. A lot of people, when I said I was going to do something for Women's History Month, do a weekly scholar, and a lot of people said you. Out of the 35 people that responded, around 18 said, why don't you get Dr. Gina Paige? Why do you think you're liked by so many people who you don't know? Why do you think so?
I didn't know I was liked by so many people I don't know. So that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, the work that we do is very powerful, and I'm a representation of the work. So maybe that's it.
What made you and Dr. Rick Kittles get together to start a genetic company? Because this is an area African Americans on a whole and Black folks have shunned away from because it's science. And we like to say, oh, it's the white man's science and all this craziness. But what made you particularly, for lack of a better term, hook up with Dr. Kittles?
Well, that's interesting that people would say this is the white man's science because Black people invented science. So I think they need to do a little more history. Black people invented science, and probably white folks have co-opted it in ways that may not always work to our advantage. But the beauty of this is that when there are Black scientists, Black researchers, Blacks in STEM that are engaged, amazing things come out of that. There are very transformative results. And so Dr. Kittles and I were introduced by a colleague at Howard University. He had this database of African lineages. Excuse me. He had the ability to use that database to identify the African origins of one's ancestry. But he's a researcher and not a business person. And so our colleague introduced us with the hopes that I could partner with him to commercialize his work and make it available to the public at large. And what made this the perfect collaboration, I would say, is the fact that we share similar values, we share a similar consciousness and belief about people of African descent, but we also each have our lanes. We have complementary lanes. He is the science and I am the business. And so that combination is what sparked the founding of Africanancestry.com.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. I noticed originally when you guys did the paternal test, it would just be like, the genealogy, it would have like the record similar to how the maternal is today. But now you guys go back to the tribe. When did you guys start differentiating the paternal test to just go towards a tribe?
From day one, we've offered the two tests, one that traces maternal ancestry and one that traces paternal ancestry. And from day one, we've been able to identify the African, present day African country and ethnic group or tribe for each test. So I'm not quite sure. There was never a time when we weren't able to do that for the paternal side. Now, I don't know if what you're referring to is for 30 to 35% of the people who take the paternal test, the result is not African.
Okay.
But that is not a limitation of the science. That is the facts of our ancestry, that European men were fathering brown babies at very high rates particularly during the period of enslavement. And so it stands to reason, and it's consistent with history, that if a Portuguese slave trader fathers a son with an enslaved woman, though that son is going to be considered Black, a Black man who will have Black sons, and so on, the Y chromosome, the part of the DNA that we analyze for paternal ancestry, is going to go back through the father to Portugal.
Right, definitely. And I think even Dr. Kittles himself, he had some some stuff with him. I think I heard him in an interview a couple of years ago talk about his Y goes back to Europe
It
because
goes back to Germany. Yep.
Mhm. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so you have my results, I hope. I would like the public, you
Oh,
have,
you haven't seen your results?
I've seen my results, but I would love for you to tell the audience about my results.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't look them up. Hold on. I got to get them. I
Oh, okay.
thought that we were just going to ask me another question while I'm
Nah,
looking
don't
them
worry
up.
about it. Don't worry about it then. We talk about it off the air. Since you don't have it ready, I thought she told you. I told her that I did the test and I wanted you to read it, publicly, or we could do a recording.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought we were just going to discuss it,
Oh,
which
okay.
I'm happy to do. I can reveal it. I just need a second. But let's ask some more questions and then I'll get there.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what would you suggest for someone who's trying to get into the genetics, geneticist type of field? What would you suggest as far as if they wanted to start their own DNA company? What would you suggest the person look at
Hmm.
before they do it?
Well, I mean, I think with any business,
If
you,
they're trying to get into the same, Mhm.
huh?
Go ahead, sis. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would say with any business, you need to understand what the consumer need is. So if you want to open a genetics company, you need to understand what problem you're going to solve for the consumer or for the customer.
Mm.
Um, and then you need to have the resources to be able to provide the answer to that, to whatever that question is, or the resolution to the problem. So if you're going to have a genetics company, I would assume you would need at least one geneticist on your
Right,
team.
right.
And then I think it's also important to understand your consumer, not just what do they want, but what are their opinions about the area that you want to have a business in. What are going to be some of the obstacles? What are going to be the things that they will readily embrace about what you have to offer? So, like with any business, understanding your consumer, understanding your product, making sure that you fill a need, or fill a void, and that you're not just copying something that already exists.
Right.
Those would be the best ways to start.
When you I'm from Jamaica. I was born in Jamaica.
Hmm.
I got raised here. Well, I wouldn't say I got raised here. I got here like when I was over 20 years old. So I pretty much grew up in Jamaica.
Okay.
Um, what I find when I come here though is, and I find like we have some sort of identity crisis, not only here but in Jamaica too, where you have people trying to be other than themselves, people
Hmm.
trying to be, they want to identify with glory, whether they want to be Muhammad, whether they want to be a Sephardic Jew, whether they want to be um, they want to bleach their skin because they don't like their color. I see like an identity crisis whether I'm in Jamaica or in New York or in California. It seems like there's some sort of identity crisis. Now, do you think that a DNA test can help in identifying that individual or telling them who they are?
Yes, I believe wholeheartedly that finding out where in Africa you come from is transformative for the identities of people of African descent. Period. Yes. Um, we walk around. The reason we have this identity crisis, as you call it,
Hmm.
is because we don't know who we are.
Right.
We have an identity void that was created during the period of slavery. The minute an African was taken from the continent and never to return again, that began the identity void. I call it identity theft. And so if you're not connected to your name, if you're not connected to your languages, your native tongue, if you're not connected to your ancestors and your spiritual practices, hell, if you're not even connected to your family, then you have an identity crisis. It's just that simple. And so, yes, I believe that. I mean, I guess it's the case for everybody, but I'm most concerned with people who look like us, Garfield. And those are the people that I've studied and been in relationship with for the past 18 years. And so I see it all the time, the way people's self-perceptions are instantly enhanced when they find out where in Africa they come from.
I went on a journey over 3 to 4 years ago where I took a bunch of different DNA tests.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And my brothers would always come to me and say, "Oh, we know where you're from. We know you got something to do with Ghana and Igbo, and because we're from Jamaica, and
Right.
we know we also have an Angola population there, and which you revealed, which was revealed during African Ancestry, the only test actually that revealed that. But when I took all these tests, I was trying to prove to the community that the science is not, it's not 100% exact, but it's a good science and it's growing. And what you just said is so moving about identifying with your language, your culture, because I grew up in Jamaica. The national dish is ackee and saltfish. Come to find out, ackee is from Ghana. Come to find out, I went to, my daughter was in the hospital. The nurse was from Ghana. And she was like, "You eat ackee, I eat ackee too. You eat saltfish, I eat saltfish too." And it was like we connected because that's what was brought over under slavery. And you are right. We can't blame that. I'm not blaming anybody for having an identity crisis, because we all do. We all have and I think, to me personally, I feel every person who's a descendant of the slave trade needs some sort of therapy. That's that whole psychological conversation. But I think that's what we lack in our community. Somebody that could just give us therapy for what we have gone through. And then if you never had therapy at the beginning and you pass on that whole thing going on psychologically, it never stops. So we need some thought of therapy or something. I don't know what it is, but we need something on a whole, because the identity crisis, nobody else is going through this. So even with the reparations argument, people are like, why they still need reparation? Because you don't know what we went through. How do you feel about the identity crisis? I had a Hebrew Israelite the other day tell an African boy, "I'm not going to invite you to my barbecue because you're a Nigerian," because he doesn't connect with him because he claims to be a Hebrew Israelite. That type of stuff just pisses me off. How do you feel? It's craziness out here. We don't want to identify, and then we cut up videos to try to disassociate ourselves from science all the time. I don't know why we hate science. It's craziness.
Yeah, we're all the same people. The only difference is some of us got to stay on the continent and the rest of us didn't. And so all of this division and disconnection that we experience and that we internalize, unfortunately, in many cases, is a direct result of the system of white supremacy. It's a direct result of that engine, the economic engine that was slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, needing us to be disconnected in order to disempower us. And unfortunately, we haven't all been able to break that spell, or break that cycle of believing the misinformation and the disinformation that tells us who we are, instead of embracing all of the literature, all of the research, all of the work that has been done to lay out very clearly for us who we are. So, I agree. It's very disappointing. It's frustrating, but it is what it is, and we just have to continue to talk to people and teach and try and undo all of the brainwashing and conditioning that has occurred.
For those who don't know, this is Dr. Gina Paige from African Ancestry, Africanancestry.com. Now, before we even get into any more questions, do you have any specials? Because you guys always have specials. I want to know if you have any specials this month for African Ancestry, for the paternal or the maternal. Because I need to take my maternal. I took my paternal. I want to take my maternal because
Well,
my maternal,
listen.
what I did is my maternal goes back to the name Allison, which is my mother's maiden name. We found the three slave masters who brought that name to the Caribbean, to Cuba, Jamaica, and to Philadelphia. So anybody with the name Allison, I'm somehow connected to them.
Mm.
My mother's father, I'm just a pebble on that. They have a whole family reunion. I'm talking about a real family reunion where they have like a
Nice.
whole chart.
Nice.
And they do it every year in Florida. And I'm just a pebble on that chart. But I see how the name Allison got to Jamaica at the ports of Mako in Clarendon, Jamaica. They went to Philly, we even have pictures of how these guys look. And the family, they did a great work with that. Now the DNA now is a whole nother argument that I'm going to have to take your test. So that's why I'm asking right now, do you have any specials for maternal on AfricanAncestry.com?
Well, you're a member of the family now, of the African Ancestry family, and there's always a discount for family members. So that's in the materials that you received when you got your results. I'm not going to share that publicly because that's just for the family. We're coming off of the month of February, and in February we had specials all month long. Every day of the month of February we had a special. So your viewers and followers and listeners are just going to have to join our mailing list, our SMS list, so that they can be alerted or notified when the next time we have a special. But for you, there is a coupon code in your materials.
Wow. Okay. I'm family now, guys. I'll get the discounts all you want. I'll get it right now. A matter of fact, once the show is finished, I'm going to order my maternal. Once you, so did you get to bring up my file?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, give me the great news live. Give it to me live. Give it to me.
So you took the paternal test, the
Yes.
Patrick test, which uses what we call the Y chromosome, which you talked about earlier, to trace the ancestry of you, your father, his father, all the way back 500 to 2,000 years ago. And as I mentioned, there's a 30 to 35% chance that result will come back something other than African. But in your case, it did come back African. And we found it on the west coast of Africa, but more in centrally located, and in the country of Angola. And the people within Angola that you share ancestry with are called the Mbundu people or the Kimbundu people. And so that's how specific we're able to get with your result. And one of the things that I wanted to point out, we're in Women's History Month. You talked about that a couple of times. And Queen Nzinga is a very powerful woman, ancestor, warrior, who was the leader of people in Angola for quite some time. And she took no stuff from people. I mean, she was known for her prowess, and it took a lot to topple her leadership. Mm-hmm. You would not find Angola as a result from any other company that you take a DNA test from, because they don't have Angolan samples in their database.
Wow, beautiful.
So one of the things that enables us to be as specific as we are is because we have the largest database of African lineages in the world. So we're comparing your DNA to the DNA of over 33,000 Africans across the continent, but most specifically from the countries of Senegal down to Angola. Dr. Kittles, my business partner and co-founder, he collaborated with researchers across the continent to collect DNA samples from populations that contributed to the transatlantic slave trade. So he made sure that he worked with historians and anthropologists to get the descendants today of people who were in the areas from which we were taken. Our colleagues, if you will, in the industry, they're not focused on Africa. They're not in the business of being Black like we are. They are not in the business of helping Black people restore their identities. They are in a different kind of business. As such, they have not invested the time, the attention, the resources in building up a database of African lineages. So whereas we have over 33,000, they may have, I'm being generous, they may have 2,000 African samples. And so there's a big difference there in terms of the degree of specificity that you would receive. The other good news is that when you sent your DNA to us, once we determined your Mbundu roots, we destroyed the DNA. Our lab destroys the DNA. So we don't sell or share our customers, because you are our family members, genetic or personal information. And I think that's very important for people to understand.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of other DNA companies, and there's one specific one that I was very disheartened to do their testing. I didn't realize that they just freely gave it away. I'm not talking like the popular ones. This was like a not too popular one. And they just give away your samples just like that, without your permission, without you knowing. And when I found that, I was like, wow. And then I noticed with you guys are more professional. The packages that you send in and the packages that you send out, you feel like you're worthy, for lack of a better term. And it's so, I'm telling you guys, when you deal with African ancestry, they take their time. And when you get your results, you're like, just opening up the package is just beautiful. It's just so professional. So I just want to tell you that personally, as a Black man to another Black woman who has a company, it's very professional. And I'm glad. I don't know why I took all those other tests. After taking yours, I'm like, wow, man, I feel, you just feel, the other tests, you just have two little things and then they send you back and, they give it to you online, the results. But I mean, just the professionalism is pretty good. When you call them up, it's a whole, the professionalism is really good. It's really good.
Well,
So
thank you. Thank you.
Guys for running a very good, professional African American company.
Thank you.
And I'm definitely endorsing what you guys do, and I'm glad for the results. And it definitely lines up with a lot of things that I've seen in the country and so forth. So I'm glad, Dr. Gina Paige, you're a Black woman. I'm glad Dr. Kills is a Black man, and I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And not only are we Black, but our entire company is made up of Black and brown people. We use as many Black businesses as often as we can. So as many of our external vendors as possible are Black owned businesses. So we are walking the talk. We're not just saying we're Black. We care about Black people. We spend our money with Black businesses and recycle the dollar. And that I think that we have a responsibility to be respectful, and this is very important information. And so that's why we take the time and the care in how we communicate it.
What is are there any new products or anything new that you guys are working on as far as African ancestry is concerned?
Well, we do have new products. So, not genetically, but we have a lot more merchandise that's available. We have masks that you can get, an Angola mask with the Angola flag on it. We have an identity box for people who aren't quite ready to take the leap with DNA. It's an opportunity for them to go through materials, a study guide, some Black History flashcards, recipe cards, artwork, stickers, all sorts of things to help remember who we are, to understand that we do have this void, and here are some tools to fill it. We have a summit coming up later this year, the Remember Who You Are Identity Summit. And we have notebooks and journals. But in terms of genetic-based products, we are in the lab. We are working on some R&D. I'm not at liberty to tell you what that is yet, but our scientists are in the lab creating new offerings based on our genetics.
Okay. Scripture Rippers, it's African Ancestry, not ancestry.com. Africanancestry.com.
Yeah.
Africanancestry.com. Get that in your heads. African Ancestry. All right. So you have some new products coming out. You have some new things. How do we get folks to start liking science more? Are you guys, I know you have your weekly show. We were talking about this off the air on Thursdays on Instagram. Can you give us the social media for Instagram? So ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gina Paige, I've caught her a couple of times where she's interviewing someone and talking about their results on Instagram, and it's like a live broadcast. Can you give out the Instagram for African Ancestry, so if anyone wants their results to be read live or to be interviewed, can you give that out, please?
Sure. We do African Ancestry Family Conversations on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And we are at African Ancestry on Instagram. You just asked a really good question, though. And we also go live on YouTube and Facebook on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. And yesterday, we had the first African American to earn a PhD in human genetics. And she's a woman, Dr. Georgia M. Dunstan. And when I tell you, if you have any questions about genetics, the role it plays, what kinds of things we can do to engage more Blacks in STEM, I would encourage everybody to watch the African Ancestry Live that was on March 17th, 2021. So to answer your question, we have to support our children and our young people in being excited about science. We have to expose them to scientists. We have to expose them to science programs. We have to expose them to science projects and technology and math and engineering, all of that together. And we have to show them Black scientists. We believe what we can be, what we can see. And so if you don't see Black scientists, then how do you even know that you can be a Black scientist? And I think that's really what we have to do to encourage our young people. And then in terms of adults and adults being comfortable with science, that's been our work for 18 years. We've been at this for 18 years. That's longer than any other company except for one in the industry. And our goal is not only to transform the way we view ourselves, our identities, and how we view Africa, but also for Black people to feel comfortable with using their DNA for something of value, right? And to build the credibility that we are a group of people that will honor and respect your genetic information, because we have to participate in this thing called science. We are living beings, and it's all happening around us, and we're going to continue to be left out if we don't participate. But you have to feel comfortable participating. And so we're hoping that the work that we do helps to make people more comfortable.
Okay, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. What about, as far as, I see some beautiful comments. Spark Divine said, I love this sister.
Oh, thank you.
Indigenous Black man, proud of the sister. We got like 120 people watching live.
Wow.
And if anyone has any questions for the sister, let me know. What are your views on the whole COVID vaccine? I saw a statistic like 3 days ago where African Americans are coming around now. They were all into the conspiracy theory stuff. This is vaccine is out to kill us and all that stuff. So now it's like at 65% of African Americans saying they willing to take the vaccine. I understand the misunderstanding of the syphilis stuff. I understand the conspiracies that we've grown up to hear, but how can we change the mindset towards a government program or a scientific program like a vaccine. And the craziest thing is all of us took vaccines as kids, but all of a sudden the vaccines back then were okay, but the ones today are no good. How do
Yeah.
we get people to be less of conspiracy theories? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tall order. And what I'll say is I think it just boils down to research. I do want to say though that the Tuskegee experiment, Henrietta Lacks, those aren't conspiracies. Those things actually happen. So we have very good reason to be concerned with how the government handles our genetic information. And we have very good reason to be concerned based on how we're treated by healthcare professionals. So that's all real. However, um, to your point, we participate in things when the value to us is high. So our parents got us vaccinated because it was important to them that we live, and they felt like, taking this vaccine was going to help that. So I think rather than listening to listening to the media, listening to Instagram, listening to people around you, the chatter, do your research, talk or research scientists that you respect, or research which scientists you should respect. Not to keep touting my show on African Ancestry, but we did an African Ancestry Live back in January with one of our scientists who is an expert on COVID. He's a researcher. And so he answered a lot of people's questions in that episode. Again, he's a data point. You just continue to do your research, read it firsthand, and then make your decisions rather than making your decisions based on what you heard somebody say somewhere over there.
Right. Um, as far as the government is concerned, as far as are you guys, is there any projects or anything that you guys are going to testify in Congress for, or anything to do with the government? Is African Ancestry working along with the government? And I have to ask this for the conspiracy theorists. I have to
Understood.
ask. I have
Well,
to
I love the question because a question we get a lot, or not a question, but a statement we hear pretty regularly is the government should pay for this. The government should give everybody a test. And I just laugh because for every person that we tell the government's going to pay for this, there'll be someone saying, I don't want the government having my DNA. So that government thing, I think, is a double-edged sword. African Ancestry does not work with the government. We are a privately held company. The co-founders own the company, so we don't have any outside investment. And we have not been called to testify in any cases. And yeah, we don't work with the government. We are apolitical also.
You know what's important? There was a killer in Oakland the other day, like a year and a half ago, and he was a police officer, and he was responsible for like I think 19 deaths. The the last resort for the FBI was to go into the databases for DNA. Have African Ancestry ever ran into an issue where the government said, hey, we'd like to expand our search for a killer? We have their DNA, but we don't have it on record. How I know African Ancestry doesn't give out your DNA, you guys destroy it. But how do you feel about a situation like that? Like with the guy killed 19 people. And what are your views on that? I know as far as business wise, you guys destroy DNA. I'm not concerned about that, but
Right.
what do you feel about a situation like that?
Well, I think it's interesting. One thing that kind of got lost in the reporting of that is the database that the FBI went to was a public database. So people put their own information into that database. It was not a company that did it. And so that was individual choice. People decided to contribute their DNA so that it could be compared to people all around the world. And so, it's kind of like supply and demand. If there's a supply, or if there's a demand and then the supply is created to meet the demand, there's really I don't know. I'm glad that they caught the guy. I'm glad that he was caught. And I'm not sure that I really have much of an opinion on what their tactics were, other than they went into a public database and everyone in that database willingly contributed their DNA.
There's a CNN did a story a couple years ago where they talked about how hospitals house people's babies' DNA.
Mm.
So a lot of people don't know that there's some people that have their DNA already. If they scared about the whole DNA housing thing, when you're born, you don't know
Well,
because
check this. When you go to the doctor and you give blood, you've given your DNA. You
exactly,
don't ask what lab it goes to. You don't ask what's going to be done with it. And my opinion is you don't ask because you want the results of that test. You
exactly,
want to know what's in your blood. When you give urine, you don't ask what lab is it going to? What are they going to do with your DNA? You give your urine because you want the job, or you want whatever analysis comes out of that testing. So we've contributed our DNA. When you give blood, not even just if your blood is taken, but when you give it with the red cross. So, I think people need to just take a step back and think about all the times they've already, to your point, the DNA is already out there. The question should be, how am I going to benefit from its use?
exactly. And and for the record, ladies and gentlemen, when you reach a certain age, because I'm in my 40s now, you got to start thinking about the next 25 to 30 years, what you don't want to have. So you're going to get tested so you could have what they call a preemptive strike, for lack of a better term, against these potential disease, whether it's prostate, colon cancer, whether it's whatever. So, and that's for anybody out there into like, I don't want to do this. Listen, you're not a doctor, you're not a professional. You need to go to the professionals who do that type of work. I'm not a blood work guy, so I'm not going to say what company is that, like I'm an expert. No, I know I'm going to Smith Blackseen or whoever else is going to do it. That's their business, that's their job to bring back results. And I think we got to respect the process. Now that doesn't mean there's not some crazy person out there that's going to do something. We're not responsible for that, but on the average, usually if you go to the doctor, you take a test, you get your results. So with African ancestry, moving forward anyway from the old conspiracy stuff, I don't want to lean on that too much with this conversation. I am so proud of you, sister. You're a light, and I and I, and
Thank
I
you.
hope I hope this interview reaches 1 million people, so that a lot of Black sisters. I'm going to play this interview. I'm actually going to send a copy to my 17-year-old. She's gonna say she wants to go to school in Europe where you guys are. So she
Oh,
might
in
go to Howard.
DC. Nice.
She says she wants to go over that side. So I'm gonna encourage her, and she wants to be a journalist. So I'm gonna encourage her, but I want her to see a strong Black woman who went to school and is being successful. So definitely. So now, for now,
Well,
I'm
thank
gonna
you.
let me see. Let me see. I'm gonna see any questions in there. By the way, I made an error earlier. Dr. Gina Paige is not a geneticist, so I don't want to feed her with all these geneticist questions. But I do want to say, I'm probably end up inviting Dr. Kills. He actually was supposed to be the one to read my results. He had promised me my inbox, but
Ah,
I'll get to talk to him another time. But as far as let me see, check your inbox. Hold on 1 second, sis. Let me see if I got a question here. Ask your kids. Come on now. Okay. All right. Well, that's conspiracy stuff. I'm not going to repeat that. So we got 150 people watching now. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Gina Page from Africanancestry.com. They have the best DNA testing as far as I'm concerned. I'll endorse it. And she read my results earlier. So if you want to hear what Garfield is, I'm not from New Zealand, as you guys assumed. I'm actually from Africa. All right. All right. And by the way, Sister Gina, where in Africa did your results go? If you don't mind sharing again, because you have
I
said it.
don't mind. I don't
You
mind
said it
sharing at
before.
all. So My maternal ancestry, mother to mother to mother on back, is shared with the Fulani people living in Nigeria today, not to be confused with the Fulani who live in Senegal or Cameroon or Mali or anywhere else. My paternal ancestry, based on the same test that you took, my father took that test because as a woman, I cannot trace paternal ancestry. And that goes back to the Hausa people living in Nigeria today.
Okay.
So those are two of the many branches of my family tree. If you think about the fact that we each have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, and it keeps going. I know the ancestries of 7 of those 8 great grandparents. So I gave you 2 of the lineages. In total, I have 4 Nigerian lineages, another Fula lineage, another and a Yoruba lineage. I have 1 Liberian lineage. So it goes back to the Kru people living in Liberia. I have an Angolan lineage like you that I share through my
we family.
I told you, through my my maternal grandmother. Her paternal ancestry is Angolan. And then I have 1 Portuguese lineage, and that would be through my maternal grandfather. So my mother's father's father was Portuguese. And that's actually consistent with our family history. So yeah, 6 of those 7 ancestries are African and 1 is Portuguese.
Right, Portuguese, yeah, definitely.
And you get to claim what you want, right? Because identity is a constantly evolving narrative of self. I don't really claim the Portuguese ancestry. Nothing about that is something that I feel informs who I am.
Right.
So I rock with the African ones.
All right, that's what's up. But you know, a lot of people, I mean, again, it goes back to the whole identity crisis stuff. They'll have 3% Middle Eastern, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm an Israelite," or you know, I'm a Moor or something. What do you think about that? As a basic, I don't want to go too much into the genetics and stuff, but
Yeah.
does it have to do with what their preference is?
Well, I think when you're talking about that type of test, that's a completely different type of test. So the test that we do look at DNA that's inherited from your mother. I know you don't want to go into genetics, but I just want to give a baseline. DNA that we inherit from our mothers, that's called mitochondrial DNA, and then the Y chromosome that we talked about. The test where they give you these percentages, they don't look at one branch or another. They look at your entire genetic family tree. That's all that DNA that's gotten mixed together. And then they parse out at these macro levels, you're some percentage this, some percentage that. One of the downsides of that is you don't know where in the family it's found. Is it from somebody on your mother's side or your father's side? It's not clear. Another downside is, again, the specificity. It doesn't get you to cultures and traditions and values and beliefs that the tribe or ethnic group would. And the third thing is you can't share those results with anybody other than your siblings. So your mother has to take a test, your father has to take a test, your cousin has to take a test. Whereas with our test, you get to share those results with everybody in the family who comes from your grandfather, everybody, now and into the future. I think that Black people who are who receive non-African results, be they from us or a percentage, I think it by saying it's these are the Moors, or you know, by trying to connect that typically non-African ancestry to Africa, it's just a way of reconciling an answer that you didn't expect. But going back to my initial recommendation that people read a book or do some research, you should know that none of us is 100% African. Those of us who are descendants of the slave trade, it just isn't. It just is not so. Whether we look like you or whether you look like me, there's some non-African ancestry in there, and so you don't have to reconcile it and try and make it attached to Africa. It is what it is. Those are just facts. That's just history. the flip side is if they want to be Moors, let them be Moors. I mean, you know, people gotta be comfortable with how they view themselves, and it's not really for us to try and change that. We just provide you with some tools so that you have more data points.
Definitely, definitely.
That
Um,
was a long answer. I'm sorry. I
no,
was
that was actually perfect. That was actually perfect. Because a lot of people run around and say they 100% Africans and so forth, which is just nuts, you know.
yeah.
And
Unless your parents were born in Africa, you're not chances you if you were born here to not to parents that weren't born in Africa, you're not 100%. You might be 90, you might be 96 or 9, but you're not 100. Sorry.
yeah. All right. So moving forward, can you just give us some information about African ancestry that we need to know in case anyone wants to order outside of the website, how to get in contact with you, or well, not directly
Sure.
contact with you, but what you guys are offering as far as a service, as far as maternal, paternal, and so forth.
Mhm. So we offer, thank you for that opportunity. We are Africanancestry.com. You can reach us online. We're at African Ancestry on Instagram. We're at African Ancestry on Facebook. We're at African Ancestry DNA on YouTube. Um, and we offer two main products, a maternal test and a paternal test. Anybody can take a maternal test, and there's a 92% chance that those results will be African. So if you want to know where in Africa you're from and you're invested in you're not so, you're going to flip a gasket if the result isn't African, then I suggest you try first with the Matriclan test. You were very brave, Garfield, to take the Patriclan test first. We also have the paternal test, and only men can take that test. So if you're a woman and you want to know something about your father's people, you need a man from that family to take the test for you. We get women time and time again who are trying to do the paternal test, and we just simply cannot. We don't have Y chromosomes. And so you can go online, order the kit, we ship it out to you the next day. You do swabbing. It's just a very gentle swabbing of your cheek. It's something that looks like a Q-tip. Or a COVID test these days, right? There's no blood, nothing like that. You send it back to us in confidential packaging. So the people who handle your DNA have no idea who you are. It goes straight to our lab. And then our scientists do the analysis. And the entire process is averaging right now about 8 to 10 weeks for you to get your results. Now, Donovan, I'm sorry, no, I didn't mean to say, I don't know where I got Donovan from. Garfield, we now deliver our results via email electronically. And we do have a new system. So now you can go log in, activate your kit on your own, check the status of your results. That has helped people not feeling more in control. They don't have to call us to
One
find out.
question, when you say that, can my results fluctuate now with more
No,
additional, or it does
no,
okay, okay,
yeah.
all right.
And part of why those results from other companies fluctuate is because their data sets are so small. If you only have 1,500 people, if you add 150, if you add 10%, that's going to make the results change. But if you have 33,000 people and you add 150, that doesn't affect the movement of the database.
I have a testing question. I don't know if you're able to answer this.
I should be able to. We'll
In
see.
This is in response to what you said earlier. In other words, if a person is oh, hold on, let me ask you both. Let me read both. When genetic testing is done, is the predominant Y DNA counted as the base Y DNA, or is the minority percentage counted as the paternal base DNA? And the reason, in other words, if a person is 90% E1B1A and 10% other DNA, which of those DNAs would be considered the base paternal DNA? I ask because certain people claim the minority is the base. It goes back to what I said to you earlier, that somebody could be 97% West African, but then they're 3% Middle Eastern. They'll say, well, I'm really Middle Eastern and I'm not African.
Right. So I think you're kind of mixed. The question mixes two things. E1, B1A, or whatever. That's a haplogroup. So that's uniquely tied to the Y chromosome. The percentages are not tied to the Y chromosome. The percentages are connected to all of your DNA.
Right. The
So
autosomal.
you're mixing two things. Your haplogroup is African if it's haplogroup E, but in terms of your Y chromosome is African if it's haplogroup E. But you still have all this other, the Y chromosome only represents one branch of your family tree. You still have all of the other branches that can go other places. And so, you can't make any kind of correlation between the Y chromosome haplogroup and your percentages. It's apples and oranges.
Great point. Great point. Great answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been into this interview for 50 minutes. This woman is superb. She's definitely in the top 100 most influential people in the African American community. Whether you believe it or not, you are. You are
Well, thank you.
extremely influential. Africanancestry.com. I'm gonna actually send this video to my daughter and said, you wanted to go to that region, Maryland or wherever, go to Howard. This sister here should inspire you. I'm gonna tell her to check it out, and I'm gonna actually probably pay for her testing. That's what I'm gonna pay for.
Oh, very nice. So she has her paternal ancestry through you, but
Right.
now she can find her maternal ancestry, which is different than your
That-
maternal ancestry. Nice.
yeah. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are not aware, this is Dr. Gina Paige from Africanancestry.com. I want to say thank you for coming on. I want to say thank you for taking the time out today. And Thursdays at 6, she normally has folks on Instagram Live, African
Yeah.
Ancestry.
Thank you very much for having me and for helping us to spread the word. This really is a labor of love, and I have a whole team of people that I work with to make it possible. So I appreciate the accolades, but I would not be that if it wasn't for our entire team and for people like you who are part of our entire family. So thank you.
All right. So, from cousin to cousin, thank you very much. And peace and love to you, family.